Welcome to A Year in the Bible with Daily Grace. My name is Kristen.
And my name is Katie. And we want to spend a few minutes a day with you walking through the New Testament, one chapter at a time. This year, we will fix our gaze upon Christ so that we may know him, not only with our minds, but with our hearts.
Together, we will learn that who Jesus is changes everything. Welcome back to A Year in the Bible with Daily Grace. My name is Kristen Schmucker, and we are journeying through the New Testament. Today, we are in Ephesians 3. As a reminder, I'm using the Behold studies from the Daily Grace Co., as well as the free reading plan, and you can find all that information in the show notes. As we pick up in Ephesians 3, we see Paul imprisoned in Rome. Paul identifies himself as a prisoner, not of Rome, but of Jesus. We see Paul willing to give his life for Jesus and for the church. This theme carries through as we see again in verse 7, Paul calling himself a servant of the gospel. Paul seeks to explain the mystery of Christ. What is that mystery? It is that the Gentiles are co-heirs and part of the people of God. The people of God are not only Jews, but Gentiles as well. Throughout the Old Testament, this plan was not fully revealed or made known to the Old Testament saints. They were giving glimpses of the picture that God was painting, but the final masterpiece had not yet been revealed. But now it has been revealed by the apostles, the prophets, and to us through the living and abiding words of God. Paul wants us to be sure that his life and any holiness in him is all grace. The grace of God changes everything. It was God's grace that changed Paul from a persecutor of Christians to a man who loved Christ and the gospel so much that he was willing to die for them. But being used by God in this way did not fill Paul with pride. Instead, we see his humble recognition of just how in need of God's grace he is. Paul sees himself as the least of all the saints because a true understanding of the gospel of God's grace will produce in each of us a deep humility. And God's grace is demonstrated before us in all the world when he uses sinful people to bring him glory. So Paul marvels at the beauty of the gospel. As we read these verses, it almost seems as if Paul is grasping for the language to describe who Jesus is and the goodness of his grace. Words seem to fail him. He speaks of the incalculable riches of Christ, of God's multifaceted wisdom and his eternal purpose. He seems to be grasping for adjectives that will somehow convey God's goodness. His words are beautiful, and yet even these beautiful words cannot fully describe the Lord of all who is far above our human language. Paul is left in awe of God's grace, and this grace is revealed through the church and even leaves the angels in awe of everything that God has done. The church is God's plan, and it proclaims his grace to the world and also to the heavens. Here we are also assured that we can come to Jesus with boldness and confidence. Let the magnitude of that sink in. We can approach God with confidence. This is only grace. So then, friends, do not be discouraged. Even in affliction and suffering, the Lord is at work in you and in his church. Paul then shifts to prayer. The mystery of grace and the church cause Paul to kneel before the Lord. We stand in awe that the God of all invites us to call him Father. Paul prays for so many things packed into just a few verses. He prays that the church would be strengthened by the Spirit according to the riches of the glory of God. He prays that Christ would dwell in the hearts of his people. His prayer is that the church would be rooted and firmly established in love. The love of God is our foundation, and Paul speaks beautifully of the necessity of knowing and experiencing the love of God. Paul wants us to know the love of God, but we can only know God's love by experiencing God's love. And we are filled when we know that love. Paul closes Ephesians 3 with a closing prayer that serves as a powerful reminder to us. We live for the glory of the one who is above everything that we could ever ask, think, or imagine, and it is for his glory that the church exists. His glory is the greatest goal of our lives. So today we behold Jesus as the one who brings the love of God near to us in himself. He is the answer to every promise and the fulfillment of every mystery that was once hidden. We behold Jesus as the embodiment of grace and the one that the gospel proclaims. We behold him as the head of his body, the church. We behold him as our example of humility and service. We behold him as the one who loves us and the one that we seek to glorify with every moment of our lives.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of A Year in the Bible with Daily Grace. Don't forget to check out the show notes for helpful links and resources related to today's episode. And make sure you are following at Daily Grace Podcast on Instagram for more A Year in the Bible content, and at the Daily Grace Co. for all things Bible study resources. We can't wait to study again with you tomorrow. Bye, friends.